It was a bright and slightly breezy spring morning in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of morning where the sun hits just right against the red brick houses lining the quiet suburban street. Birds were chirping cheerfully, and the scent of freshly mowed lawns mingled with the faint aroma of roasting coffee from the small corner cafe. In this vibrant little town, life moved with a kind of warm, sleepy precision, only occasionally interrupted by laughter, dog barks, or the rumble of a neighbor's lawnmower. Enter Max Harper, a 28-year-old freelance graphic designer, who had recently moved from Atlanta in search of quieter mornings and less traffic stress. Max had the kind of messy charm that screamed, creative type, a tangle of dark brown hair that refused conformity, sneakers that had seen better days, and a tendency to carry multiple coffee cups in one hand like a circus act in training. Today, however, Max wasn't juggling caffeine or sketch pads. Today, he was on a mission. Get to his favorite local diner for a breakfast meeting that could very well determine his next big freelance contract. Except, of course, he couldn't find his keys. The frantic search began at the front door of his modest, pastel blue townhouse. Max flipped cushions, peered under welcome mats, and even looked inside his potted ficus plant, imagining, just for a second, that the keys had developed legs and walked away in protest of his morning rush. "Okay, Max," he muttered to himself, speaking as if a pep talk could summon his keys from the ether, "maybe today is about finding more than just metal on a ring." Down the street, Mrs. Delaney, the 70-something retired schoolteacher, was watering her tulips. She squinted at Max. "Lose your keys again, dear?" she called, her voice carrying the playful scolding tone of a neighbor who knew your life better than you did. "Not again," Max groaned, dragging his hand through his hair. "I swear they had a meeting with my left shoe." By this point, Max's morning had devolved into a series of slapstick maneuvers. Kneeling to look under the car, hopping on one foot while reaching behind a bush, even attempting a full yoga-style stretch that resulted in him falling backwards onto the dewy grass. Birds scattered. A jogger, Ethan, a friendly local teenager with a skateboard slung under his arm, stopped and chuckled. "Need a hand? I think my keys are playing hide and seek, Ethan. And they're winning." The comedic chaos was compounded by Max's attempt to call his own voicemail for clues, only to discover that his phone battery had dropped to a heroic 3%. With a dramatic sigh, he slumped onto the porch steps, defeated. But that's when it happened. A glint from the neighbor's garden shed caught his eye. Max shuffled over, cautious yet hopeful, and discovered not only his keys, wedged between two terracotta pots, but also a small, handwritten note pinned under a decorative gnome. "Sometimes losing one thing helps you find another." Max blinked. Right, poetic gnome. Got it. It wasn't the keys that mattered anymore. It was what followed. The note led him to look around, and he noticed something he hadn't before. His neighbor, Sophie, a mid-30s florist with a cascade of auburn curls and a laugh that could make anyone's bad morning instantly lighter, arranging the most incredible flower display on her porch. Max had seen her before, waved awkwardly, but today he was noticing the warmth she radiated, the genuine care in every movement, and the tiny label on one of the bouquets. "For the Harpers, sorry I missed your welcome cookies." Max's day, once defined by missing keys and looming deadlines, shifted instantly to possibility. The universe, it seemed, had decided that losing his keys was not an inconvenience but a nudge. A slapstick, slightly ridiculous nudge, but a nudge nonetheless. By the time he finally pocketed the keys for the second, triumphant time, Max found himself laughing at the absurdity, the morning sun shining just right, the birds now indifferent to human folly, and Sophie handing him a small bouquet of freshly cut daisies. "I saw your gnome note," she said, smirking. "Thought you'd appreciate a proper reward for all that yoga." Max's takeaway: sometimes the chaos of losing something can open your eyes to the unexpected joys already waiting. He walked to his car, keys firmly in hand, daisies in the other, feeling lighter, happier, and slightly ridiculous, but in a very human, very real, cinematic way. And thus ended Scene 1, an ordinary suburban morning turned slapstick adventure, teaching that patience, humor, and attention to small delights can transform even lost keys into something better. By mid-morning, Asheville had settled into that soft spring warmth that made every breeze feel like an invitation. Sunlight glinted off the red brick and white trimmed houses lining Maplewood Lane, and a few early commuters drove past, their cars humming like contented cats. Max Harper, freshly victorious over the great key hunt of the morning, had parked his car in front of the diner, still clutching the small bouquet Sophie had handed him. The diner itself was a relic of the 1960s, a gleaming chrome exterior, turquoise booths inside, and a jukebox that still stubbornly played classic rock tunes. It smelled of sizzling bacon, roasted coffee, and the faint hint of vanilla from the freshly baked muffins on the counter. Max had always loved places like this, the kind of establishment where the community converged, stories were shared, and time slowed just enough for people to be human again. Today, though, Max was not thinking about pancakes or coffee. He was thinking about Sophie, and how an ordinary, slightly chaotic morning had somehow morphed into a small adventure in unexpected connection. As he pushed open the door, a tiny bell jingled, and he was greeted by Maggie, the diner's sprightly waitress in her early 60s, who wore cat eyeglasses and a perpetual smile. "Well, look who's alive," Maggie teased, setting a cup of coffee in front of him before he had even ordered. "And you're holding flowers. Did the gnome finally deliver?" Max chuckled. "Something like that. It's been eventful." By the time he settled into a booth, Max noticed a few other patrons. There was Timothy, a bespectacled high school math teacher who had accidentally dropped his coffee, eliciting a chorus of sympathetic chuckles. Leela, a 7-year-old with a backpack almost as big as her, was showing off a glittery sticker collection to her grandmother, Mrs. Connors, who beamed proudly. It struck Max again. This little town, this diner, it wasn't just a place. It was a community, full of quirks, small misadventures, and warmth. The chaos of lost keys that had so consumed his morning now seemed almost poetic. Max sipped his coffee, watching the steam curl like lazy tendrils into the bright morning air. Every face, every laugh, every minor mishap was a reminder that life didn't always follow the neat path we imagined. Sometimes, it meandered, it stumbled, it tripped, and somehow, the detours were where the best lessons lived. His reverie was interrupted by the clattering of the diner door, and in walked Sophie, holding a small potted succulent. She waved shyly, stepping carefully over the worn linoleum tiles, eyes scanning the booths until they landed on Max. "Hey," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Thought you might need this. A little extra green to replace what the gnome didn't tell you to find." Max laughed. "It's perfect. I think I've learned that losing things might just be the universe's way of pointing you toward better things." They chatted, the conversation flowing like a stream that had been blocked for too long. Max told Sophie about his move from Atlanta, the frantic mornings, the chaos of the key hunt. She shared stories of her own, the flower shop she ran on weekends, the small joys of arranging blooms, and the community of neighbors who had slowly become friends through tiny, shared moments. Outside, the street hummed with the ordinary rhythm of small-town life. A cyclist pedaled past, waving at Timothy who had stepped outside for a cigarette. Children chased each other around the corner, their laughter echoing. A delivery truck rumbled down the lane, unloading crates of fresh produce for the local farmers market. Max noticed, almost imperceptibly, how these tiny threads of daily life wove together, connecting strangers, friends, and neighbors in ways that were often invisible but profoundly sustaining. By the time they stood to leave the diner, Max felt lighter than he had all morning. Sophie tucked the succulent under her arm, smiling. "You know," she said, "sometimes losing your keys is just a test. Not of patience, but of perspective. And apparently, humor helps too." Max laughed, a sound that carried over the street and seemed to make the flowers along the sidewalks nod in agreement. "I think I'm going to take that to heart." As they walked toward Maplewood Park, Max's gaze caught a glimpse of a little boy, no more than 4, trying to climb the playground slide, wobbling but determined. A mother, Mrs. Patel, stood nearby with her hands ready to catch, and the boy's grin lit up the entire park. Max realized that life was full of these micro-lessons: persistence, humor, the courage to keep going even when things seemed ridiculous, awkward, or impossible. Max glanced at Sophie. "You know, today started with me panicking over something small, and now." He gestured broadly. "I feel like I've learned more about living in the last 2 hours than in the last 2 weeks." Sophie smiled knowingly. "That's how it usually works. The universe doesn't hand out lessons neatly. You stumble into them, sometimes quite literally." She gave a mock dramatic bow, and Max laughed, bumping her shoulder lightly. By the time the sun climbed higher, they were sitting on a bench, the city's warmth embracing them. Max realized that the day had become a testament to patience, humor, and perspective. Losing keys, missing deadlines, misplacing items, these were not failures. They were the prelude to discovering unexpected joys, new connections, and lessons in resilience. Max Harper had learned something crucial. Life didn't have to be perfectly timed, and success didn't have to be immediately visible. Sometimes, it was found in the small, funny, human moments, in the laughter that followed a stumble, in the flowers unexpectedly handed over, or in the recognition that a lost key can unlock something far more meaningful. And with that, Max's spring morning ended not with frustration, but with a sense of light-hearted triumph, a reminder that the world is always slightly chaotic, mostly beautiful, and that the best stories often start when things go wrong.
Like and subscribe if you want to be happy and motivate.